What's up, guys? This is the Draft Nerd, and I just wanted to make a quick video going over some of the bigger free agency deals that we had day one of free agency. We're not going to be going over every single free agency signing, but we're going to be going over the bigger signings. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, starting us off, we got Saquon Barkley, and as a Giants fan, this is a sensitive subject, but Saquon Barkley did sign to the Eagles for 3 years, $37.5 million. Now, biased aside, I will say this. As a Giants fan, I didn't want to really pay Saquon Barkley. I didn't mind seeing him walk. It does suck that he did go to the Eagles, but in terms of what Saquon was probably thinking, he's going to a team with a really good offensive line, a really good chance of, contending for a Super Bowl. And for the Eagles side of things, I mean, is it a bit of an overpay? Maybe. I think that a guy like DeAndre Swift would have gave you around the same amount of things that a Saquon Barkley would give you for a little bit cheaper. But, all in all, I think that Saquon Barkley might get the Eagles over the hump. So, I mean, you can't really get mad at it. We also had Kirk Cousins going to the Falcons. This was probably the biggest deal of them all. 4 years, $180 million with $100 million guaranteed. I mean, that is insane. And 4 years is a bit long for Kirk Cousins because he is up there in age. But him with that really young, talented offense is going to be really fun to watch. Seeing him throw to guys like Drake London and Kyle Pitts and having Bijan Robinson in the backfield, that's going to be extremely fun to watch. And, I mean, in a weaker division like the Falcons are in, I mean, I think that the Falcons are almost solidified as a playoff team with Kirk Cousins. So you really like to see that. It's going to be really fun to watch. So overall, I like it. It's going to be interesting to see what the Vikings do at the quarterback position now, whether they attack the position in the draft or they sign, a bridge quarterback like a Sam Darnold. Moving on to Zadarius Smith. He re-signed with the Browns for a 2-year, $23.5 million deal. Keeping a really solid edge rusher alongside Myles Garrett is a really top priority for the Browns because you don't want all the attention to go to Myles Garrett. So now that they keep Zadarius Smith around, he's always towards the top of the league in pressures and sacks. So a really solid signing, and they got him for a bit of a discount as well. So you like to see that for the Browns. We had Christian Wilkins going to the Raiders. Now, this is a massive 4-year, $110 million deal. And for an interior defensive lineman, that is a lot of money. But you got to get Max Crosby some help on that defensive line. And although that Christian Wilkins plays on the inside and Max Crosby plays on the outside, it's still going to take a lot of attention off of Max Crosby, which is very ideal for the Raiders. So overall, I like it. Maybe a bit of an overpay, but I expected it to be around that $100 million range. Then we had Jonathan Grenard going to the Vikings, and with this, it kind of solidifies the fact that we're probably not going to see Daniel Hunter back in Minnesota, which is okay in my books. I mean, he's getting up there in age, and they got a younger, more explosive pass rusher in a Jonathan Grenard. I mean, 48 pressures with a 12.8% win rate. That's, really good. So you like to see that. And for the Texans, that is a bit of a blow. They still got Will Anderson on the other side, but they need to get that, other pass rusher, hopefully in the draft maybe. We had Josh Jacobs going to the Packers along with Xavier McKinney. Both really good signings. The Packers did lose out on Darnell Savage, so replacing him with Xavier McKinney is, an upgrade. Granted, it is a 4-year, $68 million deal, which is a good amount of money. And then they got Josh Jacobs for a 4-year, $48 million deal. Again, a big deal for a running back, but I think it's going to be an upgrade over a guy like A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. We had the Titans signing Lloyd Cushenberry. Improving that offensive line is what the Titans need to do. They'll probably look to go another offensive lineman in the draft. A lot of my mock drafts, I have them taking Joe Alt. So if they're able to get Lloyd Cushenberry, Joe Alt on the left side with a Peter Skoronski, that's a really good, left side of the offensive line. Bryce Huff went to the Eagles on a 3-year, $51 million deal. I'm a big fan of this one. Now you got to question where Josh Sweat goes because you don't think he's going to be on the team. So again, Bryce Huff, who is a really good designated pass rush only type of guy, you're not really going to expect him to do much in the run game, or at least in the run defense game. So he's definitely more of a pass rush only guy, but he was up there in sacks and pressure rate. As you can see, 67 pressures, 21.3%, 10 sacks. he can get after the quarterback. He's just not so much a run defender at the 255-pound mark. Moving on, we had my New York Giants signing Jon Runyan. Yeah. To a 3-year, $30 million deal. You would suppose he takes over for the Mark Lewinsky role. Again, Jon Runyan, he wasn't ever a solid player. I was never a big fan of him. And for $10 million a year, that's a bit much. But improving that offensive line was my number one priority going into free agency for the Giants. And as you'll see a little bit later, they also, signed another offensive lineman as well. But then we had Leonard Floyd going to the 49ers. You would assume that Chase Young will no longer be on the 49ers, and they got a guy like Leonard Floyd who may see the same amount of production as Chase Young did at a way cheaper discount, you would assume. 2 years, $20 million. That's only $10 million a year for a really solid pass rusher. Again, 10.5 sacks, 41 pressures, 11.3 pressure rate. Kind of similar to a Bryce Huff. Really good pass rusher, not so much in the run defense game. We had Leonard Williams re-signing with the Seahawks for a 3-year, $64.5 million deal. But again, really solid all around. He's able to stop the run and get after the quarterback, especially when he's motivated. So you'll like to see how he plays after he's gotten that big deal. But again, a really solid signing for the Seahawks. I like that a lot. Then we had the Giants signing Jermaine Illuminor to, I don't know, maybe a backup role. I mean, the Giants, in my opinion, are still really high on Evan Neal. Maybe they kick Evan Neal into guard, and then their offensive line looks like something like Andrew Thomas, Jon Runyan, John Michael Schmitz, Evan Neal, and Jermaine Illuminor. I mean, I guess that's an upgrade from last season, but again, still, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of the signing, especially if it's just for a backup role. We had Frankie Louvu going to the Washington Commanders, and I don't know if we'll see him on this list, but the Giants also got Brian Burns, which was a massive trade / signing. They did have to give up their second round pick, but I mean, we'll get to that at the end of the video since I'm not sure if it'll be on here because it was technically a trade. But again, they lost Brian Burns, they lost Frankie Louvu. I mean, they lost a lot of guys on that defense, and I really like Frankie Louvu. He was one of the more fun linebackers to watch, one of the good defenders on the Panthers, and he's a really good tackling run defender, but other than that, I mean, he's a top 25-ish linebacker in the league. We got D'Amico Autry, who signed with the Texans on a $10 million per year contract, and again, another solid deal. Justin Jones to the Cardinals. We're going to start, jumping around a little bit. Gabe Davis to the Jaguars. This most likely means that Calvin Ridley is not going to be on the team, and getting a guy like Gabe Davis, who will kind of be your number one. Him and Christian Kirk. I mean, I'm not a big fan. He's a very inconsistent player. When he is on, though, he's a very good player. But again, just very inconsistent with the Bills, and I don't see that really changing once he gets to Jacksonville. Gus Edwards went to the Chargers after they lost Austin Eckler to the Commanders, which we'll probably get to. I like it. It's a really cheap, player-friendly deal, especially when you'll see later on that the Giants gave Devin Singletary almost double that. Robert Hunt signed a massive 5-year, $100 million deal to play presumably guard for the Panthers. Now, I mean, the Panthers had to get offensive line help, and when you're, not so great of a team, you have to overpay for, talented players. And so I do think this is a massive overpay at that 5-year, $100 million mark. But Robert Hunt's a really good offensive guard. He had tackle experience in college, so maybe they want to kick him out to tackle and have, I guess, Ike Ekwonu move to guard, maybe. I mean, because they're paying him close to tackle money. But either way, he's a really good player, just a bit of an overpay in my opinion. Michael Wenu stayed with the Patriots on a somewhat friendly deal, especially when you see Robert Hunt got $100 million compared to only $57 for Michael Wenu. I know the years, 5 years compared to 3 years, but again, a pretty team-friendly deal for Michael Wenu. DeAndre Swift went to the Bears, and I think DeAndre Swift numbers were a little bit inflated due to the Eagles' insane offensive line, and you've seen that with Miles Sanders, where he got his job taken by Chuba Hubbard. it tends to be that Eagles running backs get a bit overrated and, overproduce behind a really good offensive line, which is another reason why I really like the Saquon Barkley signing, because if he was good behind the Giants offensive line, he's going to be great running behind the Eagles offensive line. But DeAndre Swift, I will expect his production to go down a bit. I don't think he's going to be a 1,000-yard rusher for the Bears, but he might be. The Bears don't have a terrible offensive line, just not a great one. We've seen Russell Wilson go to the Steelers on I'm pretty sure a vet minimum, a 1-year, $1.21 million deal. Broncos are going to be paying most of his salary, so a really low risk reward. I wouldn't be surprised if Kenny Pickett still, wins the job. I think it's, not a done deal that Russell Wilson is going to be the starter next season, but even if he's a backup, paying him only $1 million, like, who cares? It's a very low risk deal. Noah Fant to the Seahawks, Jonah Jackson. Let's move around a little bit. Austin Eckler, like I said, to the Commanders. And Austin Eckler did have a very down season, only 628 rushing yards, but he's kind of like a slightly better Antonio Gibson. So, sure, why not? Jordan Brooks to the Dolphins. I really liked him on the Seahawks. I think that's a really good signing. Tyler Biadasz, I was never a big fan of it on the Cowboys. But the Commanders needed offensive line help desperately, so even if it's a bit of an overpay, in my opinion, the Commanders needed to get some type of offensive line for Austin Eckler to run behind. Tony Pollard went to the Titans on a solid deal, but the thing is, I'm a really big fan of Tajay Spears, and so seeing Tony Pollard probably take a lot of Tajay Spears' reps, I'm not a big fan of. I think that if you were going to sign a running back, why not just keep Derrick Henry in town? But I would have much rather them spent their money elsewhere and just gave Tajay Spears a chance to be that starter. Like I said earlier, Devin Singletary on a 3-year, $16.5 million deal. Not a big fan of that. He had a solid season last year, but he's not a bell cow running back in my opinion. So hopefully I would love to see the Giants draft a running back, maybe a Trey Benson, Blake Corum in the draft, but like a solid player, I guess. Darnell Savage went to the Jaguars. Solid pickup there. We see Geno Stone going to the... Wait, did he go to the... I could have swore he went to the Bengals. Am I wrong? I'm almost positive that Geno Stone signed with the Bengals, not the Falcons. So, either way, Geno Stone had a really solid season last year. He had 7 interceptions, which I believe was good for second in the NFL. So they got him on a value deal, and again, I don't think it's the Falcons, it's the Bengals that signed him. Jordan Hicks to the Browns was solid. Jacoby Brissett going to the Patriots. This could be the starter next season for the Patriots. They're not set in stone to draft a quarterback. I know a lot of people might have thought that because they traded Mac Jones, but Jacoby Brissett could very well be a bridge quarterback until next season, and they could draft a quarterback then, and maybe either take a Marvin Harrison Jr. this year or a trade down and just, garner a bunch of picks. Either way, I like the signing. Gardner Minshew to the Raiders. Probably going to be the starter next season. And then that's about it. The only other move of the free agency period that I really want to talk about is the Giants trading for Brian Burns. They gave up a second and I believe a 5th round pick swap to get Brian Burns on a massive, I believe $150 million deal. And I'm a really big fan of Brian Burns. I was, really wanting the Giants to draft him when he was coming out of FSU, but we didn't end up doing that. And we ended up getting him for a very steep price point, but pairing him up with Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence in the middle, I think that's going to be one of the better defensive lines in the league next season. It's just that our offense is lacking a bit. Hopefully we can address that in the draft, but with that being said, that's going to do it for day 1 of free agency. Let me know what you guys think of some of these signings, and as always, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.